Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the final episode of Scare Story Saturdays of Season 2. Before we are going to tell the story of a haunted doll named Lora, I just want to tell you, fair warning, there are some details of grim and dark topics within this story. I tried my best to make it PG-13, but this is your only warning. And for those of you who are watching this probably on November 1st, Saturday, happy belated Halloween. Now, let us move on to the grim and dark tale of the haunted doll named Lora. Everyone has a phobia of some sorts: arachnophobia, claustrophobia, trypophobia, and coralophobia. But the one phobia almost everyone around the world has is pediophobia. Pediophobia, the fear of dolls. And this story that I'm about to tell you is about a doll named Lora. She may not be as famous as Chucky, Slappy, Annabelle, Peggy, Robert, or Billy from famous movie shows or real accounts of haunted scary dolls. But hear her story and see what you may think. Excuse me. Let's first go back in time during the 1920s. There was a family who lived in a house within the city of Chicago, Illinois. Their name would be the Miltons. The owners of the house would be the name of John and Velma Milton, along with their daughter by the name of Lora Milton. Lora was a big collector of dolls. She would play dress up and treat the dolls as if they were her friends and were alive. Her parents loved spoiling their daughter with dresses along with a new doll every year for her birthday and Christmas, because that was the only thing that she loved, regardless of every other type of toy most kids would have at that time. But as time went by, things were getting rough for the Miltons. The stock market crashed, and many people were suffering poverty and unemployment, leading to many being homeless. John was a former employee of the canning industries, but when he was let go due to financial problems, he felt sad and useless, but he would try to find a job in order to support his family and finances on their house, which meant he was very determined to help his family as much as he can. As for Lora, when she was 12 years old, she would still play with her dolls and go to school along with helping her mother with cleaning the house and cook for her dad, who was always looking for a job. As for Velma, she would secretly sneak out of the house and would hang around many men, offering herself to gain money in order to get groceries and other things they needed for the house. Her husband didn't know what she was doing at night, but one day, John would invite his friend Jack over for dinner. As the three adults sat at the table, Lora was playing upstairs in her room. The couple and guests were enjoying themselves, eating and talking about the good old days, but then Jack would look at John's wife with affection, and in return, so would Velma. John, seeing this, knew that there was a connection between the two, so he asked his wife how she knew Jack. Velma would say that she met him at the store one night, and Jack would also say the same thing. John found this oddly suspicious because he felt like his wife was doing more than seeing Jack, because he would feel the left side of his bed empty every evening when they go to bed. But he disregarded it, thinking nothing would have happened. Lora, after a few minutes of playing, would bring Lora a doll named after herself, with her down the stairs into the dining room, where she would meet her parents and their guests. Lora would ask her mom if she could have some supper, and as Velma took her into the kitchen to fix her a plate, John would look at Jack with a mean expression. Jack, feeling nervous, asked if he could leave, but John would strongly say no. John would then lean closer to Jack's ear and will whisper the words, "I know you were sleeping with my wife. I don't think you could fool me, Jack. If she leaves me to see you again tonight, I will hunt you down and remove you from this earth for good." End quote. After hearing those words, Jack sat in his chair, sweating with fear and anxiety, wary of what John would do to him because of the threat he gave. A few minutes later, Lora and her mother would return, and the two men acted like nothing happened. But Velma knew John found out about their affair. Lora was eating her meal while humming to a tune, being happy as she can be. But little did she know, her parents and their guests would have tensions amongst each other. After an hour, Jack quickly grabbed his things and said farewell to John and Velma. As for Lora, her mother took her up the stairs and brought her into her room to be put to bed for the night. Meanwhile, John was in the main bedroom waiting for Velma to arrive. Velma would walk in and shut the door behind her, so Lora wouldn't hear what was about to go down. John, angry, scolded his wife for sneaking off into the night to see Jack. As for Velma, she would tell John that she didn't love Jack, only his money. John, hearing this, grew more angry and would eventually lash out at Velma. Velma tried to get John off of her as he held her on the bed with his hands around her neck, choking her. While this was happening, Lora would wake up from the sounds of muffled yelling and screaming. She would get up from her bed and walk towards her bedroom door and snuck towards her parents' main bedroom. John and Velma were still fighting each other, but then the sounds would suddenly stop. Lora, scared, knocked on the parents' door, calling out for her parents. A few seconds later, she would hear her dad sob. The door wasn't locked, and she turned the knob, opening the door. As she opened the door further, she would come to a heart-stopping sight. In shock, she would see her mother lying dead with her eyes red and her neck bruised. Her dad would be sitting on the ground crying and saying, "I'm sorry," and what have I done?" multiple times, until he looked and saw his daughter Lora standing there, seeing what the grim sight that had happened. John, realizing what his daughter was seeing, tried to call for her to come closer, but Lora was scared and saw that her dad was a monster. She turned around and ran. John, fearing that she would get the police, would get on his feet and run after her. Lora ran down the stairs and made it to the dining room where the front door will be, but as she struggled to open the door, John was right behind her, holding a butcher's knife in hand. Her dad kept calling Lora to come closer, as he crept slowly and menacingly behind her. Lora would then be grabbed by her dad and would be picked up and brought into her room. John would put her down and would grab the knife and point it at her and told her, "If you try to tell anybody what happened to Mommy, I will murder you too." Dad would eventually kill her, and sitting in the corner on the chair would be her doll, Lora, watching the whole thing unfold. After John murdered his wife and his daughter, he too would join them. The next day, neighbors would complain about a foul stench coming from the house, as if a morgue hadn't been cleaned for years. Police would later arrive at the house, seeing that no one was compliant with their greeting. They busted in and would find a gruesome crime. After investigating the house and declaring it as a homicide-suicide, they believed their case was closed and would end it on a good note. One of the officers who was on the scene noticed a doll in the bedroom. This officer was a dad of 2 daughters and would make it to a toy maker to get it cleaned and fixed up, since his face was kind of smashed when it was knocked to the floor during the investigation. After getting the doll repaired, he would give it to his daughters, Joanne and Susie, to share. Joanne, upon seeing the doll, enjoyed it, and so did Susie. When their dad asked his daughters what they were going to name the doll, they replied saying Sally, which he was delighted to see his girls happy with the new gift that he brought, even though they didn't know it came from a dark place. A few months went by, and the time would be during Halloween of 1950. The girls have grown up and are now in high school, and for their parents, their mom had passed away due to depression, which left their dad grieving and retiring from the police force. On this night, the girls have invited their friends to spend the night, but this will go from a normal sleepover to a horrifying nightmare. As the sisters and their friends gathered on the floor in the sisters' bedroom, one of the friends suggested playing with a Ouija board. At first, the sisters were hesitant, but their friends told them that it was just a goof and that it was a fun game which lowered their concern a little, but they wouldn't mind giving it a shot either way. So they turned off the lights in the room and lit some candles to give a little bit of light, and they began to set up the board and plushette. After a few seconds of setting up, the group of friends gathered around and began to play. Each of them put their fingers on the plushette, and Joanne would begin by asking the question, "Is there anyone here with us?" Then the plushette would move to the top left corner, where it says, "Yes." Joanne, thinking her sister or one of their friends was playing around, asked for them to stop, but all of them would turn to her and say that they were not doing anything, which freaked her out. Then one of the friends asked a question, "What is your name?" Then the plushette would hover around the board, and the letters would be Lora. Then the friend would put the words together and would say the name Lora. Another friend would ask Laura's ghost, "How did you die?" Then the board would select the letters Murdred, which the friend asked who you were murdered by who. The plushette would then make the sentence, "My dad." All of them felt a feeling of sadness and would apologize to Laura's ghost. Then the plushette would make another sentence, "Sally is mine." Joanne and Susie looked at the doll, and they would see it float in the air by a couple of inches from the chair. It was like it was sit from the chair it was sitting, and like someone was holding it. The two sisters would then ask if Lora was the owner of the doll before they were gifted by it. Joanne and Susie and their two friends would then hear a voice whispering the word, "Yes." After the girls freaked out, and so did their friends, they thanked Lora for contacting them and moved the plushette to goodbye. And as soon as they did that, the doll dropped onto the chair where it sat. They blew out the candles and turned on the lights and began to talk about what they experienced. Each of them were terrified, but were relieved as well, but they also felt like there was more to the story than what was let on. They decided to call it a night and went to bed. The next morning, Joanne, Susie, and their friends woke up and went to the kitchen to eat breakfast. Joanne and Susie's dad was sitting at their table reading the newspaper while drinking his coffee. The sisters and friends would look amongst each other, wondering if they should tell the sister's dad about what happened last night, and Susie was the one to bring it up. Susie would tell her dad about how they were playing with a Ouija board and made a contact with a ghost by the name of Lora. As soon as he heard the name and what they did, he dropped his coffee mug, which shattered when it hit the floor. Joanne would leave the table to fetch a broom and a dustpan to sweep the pieces. But as she was cleaning, their dad would first fuss at his daughters and their friends were playing a Ouija board, but then he would also tell the story of how he investigated the Milton home to find the dead child Lora and her parents. All of them were disturbed by the details, but they also asked him if that was where he got the doll. He replied, saying yes. He would tell them that he took the doll with him to a toy maker to clean it and fix it so that he could give it as a gift to his daughters when they were kids. Joanne, Susie, and their friends were freaked out when they saw a doll that originally belonged to Lora levitate from the air, and that they had an artifact from a crime scene that happened 20 years ago. No, 30 years ago. They decided that it would be best to return the doll to its rightful owner, thinking it would grant the girl's spirits some peace. Their dad would tell the kids to get their things and the doll because it was now time for the two guests to return home and return the doll to the grave of Lora at the cemetery. They first dropped off their visitors and then made for the cemetery. When they arrived, they got out of the car and entered the area, and their dad guided them to where he would visit her grave every year on the anniversary of her death. They would eventually find the grave of Lora and the Miltons and would place the doll on the tombstone where she lied. All three of them would pay their respects, and Susie would wish Lora to have peace, that her doll had returned to her, and since then they were not haunted ever again. Okay, so this is the final story of Scare Story Saturdays. I'll see you guys next year, and be prepared for another season of frights.